Beneath the icy waters of Lake Superior, an underwater drone descends through absolute darkness toward the most famous shipwreck in Great Lakes history. The Edmund Fitzgerald vanished on November 10, 1975, taking 29 men to the bottom in a storm that should not have killed her. For nearly 50 years, the official story blamed a rogue wave, an act of nature, an unavoidable tragedy. But high-resolution imaging captured by autonomous drones has revealed evidence that rewrites everything we thought we knew about that night. Evidence of design flaws, inspection failures, and decisions made in boardrooms that sealed the fate of 29 sailors before the storm ever arrived. The wreck sits 530 feet beneath the surface, deeper than most commercial diving operations can reach, shrouded in darkness and frigid water that hovers just above freezing year-round. For decades, the technology to examine her simply did not exist. Grainy sonar images from the 1970s and 80s showed a broken hull, but nothing more. Documentaries repeated the same theory: a rogue wave, a sudden catastrophic failure, 29 men lost without a distress call, without warning, without a chance. Then, in 2024, the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society deployed the latest generation of autonomous underwater vehicles, equipped with three-dimensional imaging capabilities that did not exist when earlier expeditions reached the Fitzgerald. The drones spent 200 hours photographing every visible surface of the wreck. They captured over 400,000 images, and they recorded 16 terabytes of data. When researchers assembled those images into a complete digital model, they discovered something that 5 decades of investigation had missed. The hull damage pattern was wrong. The Coast Guard had concluded in 1978 that massive waves had caused the ship to break apart on the surface. The evidence at the bottom of Lake Superior told a different story. Fractures radiated from specific points of structural weakness. Deck plates had separated at seams in ways consistent with gradual stress, not sudden catastrophic impact. The break between the bow and stern sections showed progressive failure, not the violent separation a rogue wave would create. But the most disturbing discovery was what the scans revealed about the cargo hatches. 21 hatch covers, each weighing over 1 ton, were designed to keep the lake out of the cargo hold. The digital reconstruction showed multiple hatches with gaps between the covers and the coaming, the steel lip they were supposed to seal against. Water had been entering the ship long before any wave struck. The Fitzgerald had been flooding from above, through hatches that were never properly secured. The vessel had been modified in ways that weakened her structure, and she was carrying a load that exceeded safe limits in conditions her designers never anticipated she would face. The ship that ruled the lakes. When the Edmund Fitzgerald slid down the ways at the Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge, Michigan, on June 7, 1958, she was the largest ship ever built on the Great Lakes, 729 feet long, 75 feet wide, capable of carrying 26,000 tons of iron ore in a single voyage. Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company had commissioned her construction at a cost of $8 million. She was named for the company's president and chairman, a man who would never set foot aboard the vessel that bore his name, but whose decisions about cost and construction would echo through the decades. The Fitzgerald was a Great Lakes bulk carrier designed for one purpose: hauling iron ore from the mines of Minnesota to the steel mills of Detroit, Toledo, and Cleveland. She was not built for beauty. She was built for capacity. Every inch of her design prioritized cargo space over everything else. Her hold stretched 592 feet, nearly the entire length of the ship. When fully loaded, she rode so low in the water that waves regularly swept her deck. Sailors called vessels like her riverboats, ships that delivered maximum tonnage with minimum freeboard, the distance between the waterline and the deck. For 17 years, the Fitzgerald dominated Great Lakes shipping. She set records. In 1964, she carried more ore than any other vessel on the lakes. In 1968, she became the first ship to haul more than 1 million tons in a single season. Her crew took pride in her reputation: the fastest ship on the lakes, the Queen, of the Great Lakes. Captain Ernest McSorley had commanded her since 1972 and knew every quirk, every sound, every way she handled in heavy weather. But the Fitzgerald had problems that no one wanted to acknowledge. She had been built during a period when Great Lakes shipping companies were pushing the limits of vessel size. Longer ships meant more cargo meant higher profits. The engineering compromises required to achieve those lengths were considered acceptable trade-offs. The hull plating was thinner than older vessels. The structural reinforcements were lighter. The deck fittings were designed to minimum standards. And then there were the modifications. Over her 17 years of service, the Fitzgerald had been altered repeatedly to increase capacity and efficiency. In 1969 and 1970, she was converted from coal to oil-fired boilers. In 1971 and 1972, sections of her deck were modified. Each change added weight. Each modification stressed the hull in ways the original designers had never calculated. By 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald, sailing out of Superior, Wisconsin, was not the same ship that had been launched in 1958. She was heavier, more stressed, and more vulnerable than anyone aboard her understood. November 10, 1975. The voyage begins in Superior, Wisconsin. The Edmund Fitzgerald prepares to depart on what should be a routine trip to Detroit. 26,116 tons of taconite pellets, processed iron ore formed into marble-sized balls, sit in her cargo holds. The load brings her draft, the depth of hull beneath the waterline, to 27 feet 2 inches. She rides low and heavy in the water. Captain McSorley checks the weather forecast. A storm is developing over the northern plains, tracking east across the lakes. Gale warnings are in effect. This is nothing unusual for November on Lake Superior. He has sailed through worse. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the Fitzgerald casts off from Burlington Northern Dock No. 1 and steams out into the open lake. Following behind her is the Arthur Anderson, another ore carrier commanded by Captain Jesse Cooper. The two ships are taking the same route across Lake Superior, heading east toward the locks at Sault Ste. Marie that connect Superior to the lower lakes. The voyage should take roughly 14 hours in calm conditions. With the storm approaching, it will take longer. As the Fitzgerald clears the harbor, her crew goes about the familiar routine. Chief Engineer George Hall supervises the engine room. First Mate Jack McCarthy coordinates deck operations. 29 men in total, most of them veterans of Great Lakes shipping. They know the lake. They know the ship. They trust both to get them home. What none of them know is that the vessel beneath their feet has been compromised in ways that no inspection has ever detected. The hatch covers sealing the cargo holds are secured with manual clamps, devices that require physical tightening by hand. On a ship 729 feet long, carrying 21 massive hatch covers, proper securing is a time-consuming process. Crews under pressure to maintain schedules sometimes cut corners. A clamp not fully tightened leaves a gap, and a gap allows water to enter. On a calm day, this might not matter. In a storm with waves washing over the deck, every unsealed hatch becomes a funnel pouring thousands of gallons into the holds below. The Fitzgerald steams east into gathering darkness. The barometric pressure of it is dropping. Wind speeds are increasing. Somewhere ahead, the worst storm in decades is moving across Lake Superior, waiting. By 7 o'clock on the evening of November 10th, the storm had arrived. Wind speeds reached 50 knots, gusting higher. Waves built to 12 feet, then 15, then 18. The Fitzgerald and the Anderson steamed northeast, hugging the Canadian shore where the fetch, the distance wind travels across open water, was shorter. Protection is relative. 18-foot waves in near-freezing water are deadly regardless of which shore you favor. Captain McSorley maintained radio contact with Captain Cooper aboard the Anderson. The two ships stayed within radar range of each other, a common practice in heavy weather. At 7:10, McSorley radioed Cooper with a problem. The Fitzgerald had lost both radar units. She was running blind in a storm with visibility near zero. Cooper acknowledged and agreed to provide navigational guidance, calling out courses and positions to keep the Fitzgerald on track. The loss of radar was concerning, but not catastrophic. What worried McSorley more was something he did not mention to Cooper. The Fitzgerald was developing a list. The ship was tilting slightly to one side, a sign that water was accumulating somewhere it should not be. McSorley ordered pumps started to remove the water, but he did not specify where the water was coming from. At approximately 3:30 that afternoon, the Fitzgerald had reported damage near 6 Fathom Shoal, a shallow area north of Caribou Island. McSorley radioed that he had taken on a list and had lost 2 ballast tank vents. The implication was that the ship had struck bottom. But the depth over 6 Fathom Shoal is 36 feet. The Fitzgerald drew 27 feet loaded. She should have cleared it with 9 feet to spare. The Coast Guard investigation would later conclude that the Fitzgerald had not struck bottom. But if she had not hit the shoal, then why was she listing? Why were the pumps running? The answer may have been visible to anyone standing on deck that night. Waves were sweeping across the Fitzgerald's deck with every roll. Thousands of gallons of water crashed over the bow and surged down the length of the ship. If even one hatch cover was improperly secured, if even one clamp had been left loose, water pouring across the deck would find the gap and funnel into the cargo holds below. As water accumulated in the holds, it would mix with the ore, creating a dense slurry that added weight and reduced stability. It was a feedback loop with only one possible outcome. By 7:30, the Fitzgerald was in trouble. Her pumps were running continuously. Her list had not improved. She was riding lower in the water than she should have been. McSorley knew something was wrong, but he did not know how wrong. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, the mathematics of buoyancy and stability were closing in on the Edmund Fitzgerald. The final hours. At 7:10, the Anderson's radar showed the Fitzgerald approximately 17 miles ahead, steaming east-northeast toward Whitefish Point. Captain Cooper called out courses and positions to guide the blind Fitzgerald through the storm. McSorley acknowledged each transmission. His voice was calm, professional, showing no sign of panic. At 7:25, the Anderson made contact with the Swedish freighter Avafors, asking if she could see the Fitzgerald on radar. The Avafors confirmed a target matching the Fitzgerald's position. The Queen of the Lakes was still moving, still under power, still on course. But aboard the Fitzgerald, the situation was deteriorating. First Mate Jack McCarthy called the Anderson at approximately 7:30. He reported that the Fitzgerald had a bad list, that she had lost both radars, and that they were taking on water. He asked Cooper to stay with them until they reached Whitefish Bay. Cooper agreed. McCarthy thanked him. The call ended. This was the last communication anyone would have with the Edmund Fitzgerald. Sometime between 7:30 and 7:45, she vanished from radar. Cooper attempted to raise the Fitzgerald by radio. No response. He tried again. Silence. He switched frequencies and called repeatedly. The Fitzgerald did not answer. At 8:32, Cooper contacted the Coast Guard. The Fitzgerald was missing. The Coast Guard asked if Cooper could see any lights. He scanned the darkness with binoculars. Nothing. No distress flares. No searchlights. No navigation lights. The lake had swallowed the Fitzgerald whole. What happened in those final minutes can only be reconstructed from physics and the evidence left behind. Water entering through unsealed hatches had been accumulating in the cargo holds for hours. The weight pulled the ship deeper into the water. The deeper she rode, the more her bow plowed into oncoming waves. Green water, solid masses of lake rather than spray, began breaking over the forward deck with increasing force. At some point, the bow submerged completely. Water poured through hatch covers, through vents, through any opening that led below. The Fitzgerald's bow dropped further. Her stern rose. Steel that had been stressed by 17 years of heavy loading began to fail. Deck plates separated at their seams. The ship broke in half. Both sections struck the lake bed 530 feet below the surface within moments of each other. 29 men died. None survived to describe what they experienced. No distress call was transmitted. The Fitzgerald went down so fast that her crew had no time to react, no time to send a mayday, no time to reach survival equipment. The Anderson arrived at the last known position and found nothing. Coast Guard vessels found debris, life jackets, pieces of wood and cork, but no survivors. No bodies. The lake had taken everything. If you are still here, you have witnessed the Queen of the Lakes vanish in minutes, taking 29 men into darkness without a single distress call. Comment 2 below if you are following this investigation, and if you have not subscribed, please do so and turn on the bell notification so you do not miss what comes next. Your support helps us tell the stories that official reports left incomplete. Now let us see what the Coast Guard concluded and why their answers left more questions than they solved. The Coast Guard investigation began within days. The Coast Guard formed a Marine Board of Investigation, the highest level of inquiry the service could convene. Hearings opened in February 1976 and continued for months. Witnesses testified. Experts analyzed data. Naval architects built models and ran simulations. The final report was released in July 1978, nearly 3 years after the sinking. The conclusion was definitive. The Fitzgerald had been overwhelmed by massive waves. The board theorized that the ship had either struck bottom on 6 Fathom Shoal, causing hull damage that led to progressive flooding, or had been struck by a rogue wave that collapsed her cargo hold. Either scenario resulted in catastrophic flooding, loss of buoyancy, and structural failure. The sinking was ruled an act of nature. No one was held responsible. Case closed. But the report left critical questions unanswered. If the Fitzgerald had grounded on 6 Fathom Shoal, why was there no evidence of bottom damage when the wreck was later examined? If a rogue wave had collapsed the cargo hold, why did the hull fractures not match the expected pattern of sudden catastrophic impact? And most troubling of all, why had a ship designed to handle Great Lakes weather been so completely destroyed by conditions that other vessels in the same storm had survived? The Anderson had been in the same storm, experiencing the same waves, the same wind, the same brutal conditions. She survived with minor damage. The Avafors survived. Every other vessel on Lake Superior that night made it to port. Only the Fitzgerald went down. If the storm was to blame, why had it killed only one ship? The families of the 29 dead sailors found the report inadequate. They demanded to know why hatch covers were not required to have stronger securing mechanisms. They wanted answers about the structural modifications the Fitzgerald had undergone. They asked why ships were allowed to operate with such minimal freeboard that waves regularly washed over their decks. The Coast Guard issued recommendations. Hatch covers should be improved. Loading practices should be reviewed. Weather routing should be enhanced. But no regulations were changed. No fleet-wide inspections were ordered. The industry mourned its dead and moved on. The wreck itself became a protected site. Michigan law designated it a grave site, prohibiting diving without special permits. The families did not want their loved ones disturbed. The debate over what had caused the sinking faded from public attention. The Edmund Fitzgerald became a legend, immortalized in song, commemorated in museums, remembered every November 10th when the bells toll for the 29. The story was settled. A storm, a rogue wave, an unavoidable tragedy. Except that the physical evidence at the bottom of Lake Superior told a different story. And for nearly 50 years, the technology to properly examine that evidence did not exist. The first expedition to locate the wreck in 1976 used basic sonar that showed only rough outlines. A Navy submersible reached the site in 1989 and captured limited video footage showing the bow and stern sections separated and lying 530 feet down. The images were grainy, the lighting poor, the detail insufficient for proper analysis. Limited imagery left room for interpretation. Documentary crews visited the wreck multiple times over the decades, Each expedition brought better cameras, better lights, better equipment, but each expedition was limited by the same fundamental problem. Human divers could not reach the depth safely. Remotely operated vehicles of the era lacked the maneuverability and imaging capability to document the wreck comprehensively. Investigators could see pieces of the Fitzgerald, but they could not see the whole picture. They could observe damage, but they could not measure it precisely. They could theorize about what had happened, but they could not prove it. The wreck kept its secrets until the drones arrived. What early technology could not see. The limitations of early wreck documentation were severe. Sonar from the 1970s could locate the Fitzgerald and provide rough dimensions, but it could not show detail. The images resembled shadows, vague shapes on a screen that required interpretation. Investigators knew the ship had broken in two, but measuring the exact distance between sections, analyzing fracture patterns, or documenting critical components was impossible. The 1989 Navy submersible dive brought the first visual confirmation. The footage showed the bow section upright and relatively intact. The stern section was heavily damaged, crushed and twisted from impact, but the submersible's cameras captured only what fell within their narrow field of view. There was no comprehensive survey, no complete mapping, no way to examine the wreck as a unified whole. Subsequent expeditions in the 1990s and the 2000s brought incremental improvements. Better cameras meant clearer images. But the fundamental problem remained. Every expedition was looking at fragments. Understanding how these pieces fit together required assembling a mental image from dozens of separate observations. Human memory is fallible. Different observers saw different things. The hatch covers became a particular point of contention. Some investigators believed water had entered through damaged hatches. Others argued flooding had occurred through hull damage. The visual evidence was inconclusive. The technology gap meant that for nearly 50 years, the Edmund Fitzgerald investigation relied on partial information, incomplete observations, and educated guesses. The drone changes everything. In 2024, the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society partnered with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to conduct the most comprehensive survey of the Edmund Fitzgerald ever attempted. Autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with high-resolution cameras, multi-beam sonar, and photogrammetry systems descended to the wreck site. Over 200 hours, these drones photographed every visible surface of both the bow and stern sections, the debris field between them, and the lakebed surrounding the wreck. The autonomous underwater vehicles operated without direct human control, following pre-programmed search patterns that ensured complete coverage. Their cameras captured 427,000 images. Their sonar systems recorded three-dimensional measurements accurate to within millimeters. Every photograph could be georeferenced and placed in exact relationship to every other image in the survey. Researchers fed the data into artificial intelligence processing systems designed to assemble massive image sets into unified three-dimensional models. The result was a digital twin of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a complete virtual reconstruction that allowed investigators to examine the wreck from any angle, measure any distance, and analyze damage patterns with forensic precision. For the first time in nearly 50 years, researchers could see the Fitzgerald as she actually existed on the lakebed, not fragments glimpsed through murky water. The entire wreck, rendered in 3 dimensions, frozen in digital space, available for unlimited examination. The model revealed details that decades of expeditions had missed. The 21 massive steel plates that sealed the cargo holds could now be examined individually and collectively. What investigators found was disturbing. Multiple hatch covers showed gaps, spaces between the cover and the steel lip it was supposed to seal against. Some hatches appeared properly seated. Others showed separation measuring several inches. The pattern suggested that the hatches had been unevenly secured, with some clamps properly tightened and others left loose or inadequately fastened. The implications were immediate. Water washing over the deck during the storm would have poured through these gaps directly into the cargo holds. The Fitzgerald had not been holed by grounding or struck by a rogue wave. She had been filling from above, through her own cargo hatches, for hours before she sank. The flooding was gradual, progressive, and entirely preventable. To understand why the Fitzgerald sank, you have to understand how Great Lakes bulk carriers were built in the 1950s. The fundamental design philosophy prioritized cargo capacity over everything else. Every ton of ore meant more revenue per voyage. At 729 feet, the Fitzgerald was the longest ship that could fit through the locks connecting the Great Lakes, but achieving maximum cargo capacity required compromises. The hull plating was thinner than earlier ships, structural ribs were spaced farther apart, deck beams were lighter. The designers calculated the minimum strength needed and built to that minimum. The Fitzgerald had been working the lakes for 17 years. Every voyage stressed her hull. By 1975, her structure was not what it had been in 1958. The steel was tired. In 1969 and 1970, the Fitzgerald underwent a major refit. Her coal-fired boilers were replaced with oil-fired units. Weight was added. The stress distribution changed in ways the original designers had never calculated. Every one of these design compromises was legal. Every one was standard industry practice. And everyone contributed to the death of 29 sailors. The most damning revelation from the drone surveys was not what they showed about the Fitzgerald. It was what they showed about the decisions that put her on the lake that night. The ship should not have been sailing. The cargo load should not have been approved. The inspection regime that certified her seaworthy was fundamentally inadequate. 26,116 tons of taconite is an enormous load. The Fitzgerald's maximum capacity was 26,400 tons, giving only 284 tons of margin. Loading practices prioritized maximizing tonnage. The calculations did not account for weather or hull fatigue. The hatch securing procedures represented another preventable failure. Manual clamps required physical inspection and tightening. Crews under pressure to maintain schedules had incentive to cut corners. Great Lakes vessels underwent annual inspections, but these inspections were cursory. Hulls were examined visually while afloat. Hatch covers were observed but not tested for water tightness. The Fitzgerald sailed on November 10, 1975, because every system designed to prevent disasters had failed. What the evidence proves. The AI-processed drone surveys proved what 5 decades of investigation could not. The Edmund Fitzgerald did not sink because of a rogue wave. She sank because water entered through improperly secured cargo hatches, accumulated in her holds, reduced her stability, and caused progressive structural failure that broke her in half. The hatch gap measurements are conclusive. Multiple hatches showed separation from their coamings, providing direct paths for water to enter the cargo holds. The hull fracture analysis is equally definitive. The break occurred due to progressive failure, not sudden catastrophic impact. No evidence supports the rogue wave theory. No evidence supports the grounding theory. The Fitzgerald was killed by decisions made in boardrooms and shipyards, by loading practices that prioritized profit over safety, by inspection regimes that certified compromised vessels as seaworthy. 29 men trusted the Fitzgerald to protect them. She was not strong enough. The decisions that put them on an overloaded, compromised vessel in conditions it could not survive killed them. The Edmund Fitzgerald rests on the bottom of Lake Superior, where she has lain since November 10, 1975. The site is protected. Diving is prohibited. The 29 men who died aboard her remain entombed in the wreckage, in water so cold that nothing decays, nothing rots, nothing changes. For nearly 50 years, the official story blamed the storm, a rogue wave, an unavoidable tragedy, an act of nature. But the drone surveys have rewritten that narrative. The evidence captured in 427,000 images and rendered into millimeter-precise 3-dimensional models tells a different story. This was not fate. This was not unavoidable. This was the result of choices. The choice to load her with 26,000 tons. The choice to sail into a forecast storm. The choice to rely on manual hatches that required perfect execution to seal. The choice to build ever longer ships with ever thinner hulls. The choice to inspect superficially rather than thoroughly. The choice to prioritize schedules over safety, tonnage over integrity, profit over lives. The iceberg did not sink the Titanic. The storm did not sink the Edmund Fitzgerald. In both cases, the ships were doomed before they ever left port. The only difference is that the Titanic's flaws have been known for over a century. The Fitzgerald's flaws required autonomous drones, artificial intelligence, and 50 years of technological advancement to finally expose. The wreck will remain where she lies. The bells will toll every November 10th. The families will remember, and the evidence will stay frozen in digital form, a permanent record of what happens when institutions fail and no one is held accountable. The lake pulled the trigger, but the shipyards and the boardrooms loaded the gun. 29 men paid the price, and the truth has been waiting in the darkness all along.